Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales, whether it's from confidence, comfort, and just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers. We know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help professionals like you improve at sales through process, practice, frameworks, and thinking differently about what you already know. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and we are with the founder of Catalyst Sale, Mike Simmons. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Jody.
Okay, Mike. Well, I'm going to take over this episode because I have my own question. I know you have topics. We're going to have listener questions soon, but I give that introduction every week that I'm on the show, and there's one piece that stands out to me. So that introduction says, many of us struggle with sales, whether it's from confidence, comfort, and just not wanting to be salesy. Now that's predominant enough that you put it in the introduction. This introduction, by the way, was written by Mike. We probably already have said that at some point. But not wanting to be salesy is a big enough piece of sales that Mike put it in the introduction to this podcast to indicate that we struggle with sales for that reason. And I want to help people that are going through that, Mike, because that's really difficult when your livelihood depends on sales, but you get in your own way because you do everything you can to not seem salesy. So what advice do you have for someone going through that?
Well, let me ask just a couple of questions. Can you think of a time where you were really happy that someone was selling to you or were being sold to?
Well, I'll give one recent example is I needed new tires for my Mitsubishi Montero, and here I had a problem. I need new tires, and the guy at Les Schwab gave me 3 options. And I felt, now that's really good. Of course he's selling to me, but he's selling to me so I know what my options are to fix my problem. If he wasn't really into selling, didn't want to be salesy, now I get it. Les Schwab probably gives them scripts, probably tells them you have to present 3 options. Yeah, I get all of that. But presenting the 3 options benefits me because he said, hey, if you do a lot of off-roading, this is the tire you want. And I'm like, no, most of my, I know I got a Montero, but most of my miles are on the road. He's like, okay, well, this is the one you want. But if you want to save money, just go with this one. If he was worried about being salesy, I'm sure he'd just say, look, here's the cheapest tire we have. But that wouldn't give me what I wanted. I wanted a better tire that's more suited for the highway than off-road. So him selling to me helped me find the best solution for my problem of needing new tires.
Well, and he's highlighting a couple of traditional problems that he's familiar with. So he's like, hey, if this is something that's important to you, then do this. If this is something that's important to you, then do this. If this is something that's important to you, then do that. That's a bit different than coming in and saying, when you walk in the door, saying, hey, Jody, checked out that Montero, and not only do you need some new tires, but that would look pretty awesome if you put a set of 20-inch wheels on there, and you could get these like really low profile tires that are meant for the road, even though you've got a vehicle that's supposed to go off road. And now we're going to put you into a new set of wheels and tires instead of just tires. And in that instance, you probably feel a little bit more uncomfortable or a little bit less comfortable, where you're in the scenario and someone's just you came in with a problem. You just need to replace some tires. You're not looking to put new wheels on the vehicle. The wheels on it are fine. And here's someone who's trying to sell you something that you don't necessarily need. I think there's a distinction there. And the distinction is, this is someone who has a genuine interest in sharing a couple of scenarios that will help him frame the next part of the conversation. Because if he said, hey, you know what? If you had said, I spend a lot of time on fire trails, I spend 90% of the miles that I get put on the vehicle are on fire trails or off-road, then the tire that you're going to move toward, regardless of cost, might be the one that's set up for off-road. So I think the big distinction there is, in that instance, the person's really trying to help you out by asking a couple of questions. And those are important to him so that he provides the right kind of guidance, helps you solve that problem. And he's not in there really working to push something that you don't need, which I think when people hear salesy, they think of the person who is, actually, you're out there listening. Think of salesy. And what's the first thing that comes to mind. For most people, it might be used car salesman. Another one, it might be the people that come around and knock on your door and ask if you want to change your exterminator service, depending on if you've got those in your neighborhood. These are they're the stereotypical salesy, and people don't want to be that because they don't feel really comfortable with that. Or at least I don't feel comfortable with that. That's not my approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good example that you gave. So if somebody is uncomfortable selling, do you think any part of it has to do with their feelings toward what they're selling? Does that play into it at all?
100%. You've got to believe, in my mind, you have to believe in the product that you're selling. And even more importantly than the product that you're selling, you have to believe in the problem that you're solving for. When you start to believe in the problem that you're solving for, believe that it's necessary to solve for this problem, then you can be more empathetic to the customer. You can put yourself in their shoes. You can get into that scenario where, if I'm in the process of buying tires, I'm going to make a pretty big decision. I probably only do this every 20 to 25 or 30,000 miles. Depending on how much I drive, this is a decision I make once every 3 years. But it's also a really important decision in that it is the one piece of the vehicle that is touching the road all the time, depending on how well you handle corners. And as long as it's touching the road, that is probably one of the most important safety features that I've got on the vehicle. The tire, the brake, the things that help me slow down, the things that help me accelerate. So tires, brake, gas pedal, these are all important items. So I want to make sure that I am being thoughtful in the way that I make a decision. And if I can work with someone who's going to help me guide me through that decision so that I make the right decision, I'm going to feel much better about that. If I'm talking about the difference between a set of tires that I might pay $600 for or a set of tires that I might pay $1,200 for, is that extra $600 worth the safety, worth the convenience, worth the application, worth any number of things to justify that extra expense there. And whether we're talking about tires or we're talking about software, or we're talking about any number of things, the same fundamental concepts apply. If we take an approach where we're putting the customer first, we're helping them solve problems because we are intimately aware of the problem and we're passionate about the solution that we're delivering, then that will translate well to the customer and their confidence will increase. They won't feel like you're selling to them. It'll feel more like you're guiding them, you're a trusted advisor, you're helping them solve a problem because you care about it.
Well, and that is exactly it. If you care and you've got a solution to a problem that somebody has, why would you not tell them about it? And just telling somebody about something that's going to help them doesn't come across as salesy because you believe in it, like Mike said, and the customer has a problem. So I think that is one of the keys, that you believe in the problem that you solve. And in doing that, in solving that problem, I think you come across as less salesy.
And if you ask questions and then sit and listen, like take a genuine interest in the response and then reflect that response back to them, share your information in the context of what you found is important to the customer, then you're, again, guiding them in this process. You're not guessing. A lot of times people will guess. Now, in this instance, the rep over at Les Schwab said, look, there's 3 common use cases that people have. One common use case is I'm going to be driving off-road a lot. Another common use case is I'm not going to put a lot of miles on it. And another common use case might be, hey, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the road, or maybe I'm doing both the road and off-road, whatever it is. But they've got data that they have based on the common use cases that they see based on customers that they've worked with in the past. So they just ask some general questions or make some comments about, if you do this, then do this. If you do this, then do that. If I'm in a complex sales environment, I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to say things like, okay, so how important is it to feel stable when you're off-road? How important is it to have whatever the next question might be? This how important piece starts to help me get a better understanding of what is the customer thinking about. The customer may not have even considered those questions. They might not even thought about how important those things were. They were just thinking, hey, I need tires for my Montero. No, we're really going and following the thread related to the Montero, but this applies to anything, any problem that we're solving for in the marketplace. Let's ask some additional questions so that we gather context. We're not making assumptions, and then we're delivering information in the context of what we know and understand is important to the customer. And again, that's where that trust will start to improve, and they'll be open to and interested in your advice.
I also think when you ask the questions Mike talks about, and you're then talking about the customer's own individual problem, even though it's the same problem other people that you talk to have, it helps them feel like you're talking to them, about them, for them, which also feels less salesy. So Mike, as we wrap this one up, what other words do you have for us about this idea of, I don't want to be salesy getting in our way?
Don't be salesy. And I know that sounds blatantly obvious, and people are like, okay, wow, that was a novel way to talk about it. If you wouldn't want to have that same kind of conversation with your grandmother, or you wouldn't want your grandmother watching you have that conversation, or you feel uncomfortable if your grandmother saw you doing that, or your grandfather, or your mom, or your dad, or whoever, your kid, if you felt like if somebody else was your boss, if somebody else is watching you do this thing, and you think they might cringe if they heard you do the thing that you're doing, pause, think about it a little bit further, and maybe come up with a different approach. And you do not have to be salesy when it comes to sales. You do have to be, there are times to be very direct. There are times to be asked direct yes, no type questions. There are times to leave open-ended questions where you're trying to gather information. There are times where you have to call people to action. But that call to action, that next step that someone goes through, should just be that next piece in the process. It should be the next thing they're thinking about. It should just make sense for them to move from one place to another, just kind of in the same way. And if you're driving down the road and you go through a couple of different cities, as you move from one city to another, you expect to go to the next city. You expect to get to the next city after that as you move on that journey. This sales should be one of those things where the next step just makes sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, then something's wrong. You either haven't gathered enough information, you've not asked the right questions, or you're potentially trying to convince someone that they need something that they don't. Sales is not about convincing people things. It's about compelling folks to take action that will help them solve a problem that exists, whether it's known or unknown, and solve that with a solution that exists, whether it's known or unknown. And our job as sales professionals is to help accelerate that path. We help people. We don't just, sell to people.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike, for covering that. Like I said, I read that every week when we start out a show, and I just thought we need to get in deeper on that. If you have a topic you'd like Mike to discuss, reach out to us. Find Mike on Twitter. Well, Mike, I'll let you say it. How do we send in a topic?
You can send a topic to the email address, which is podcast@catalystsale.com. And if you're not in front of a place where you can put email down, then just go to Twitter, like Jody had said, and go to our Twitter account is @CatalystSale, and direct messages are open. So just enter in topic recommendations, or you can ask the question in public, and I'll respond in public. If you see a response to a tweet at Catalyst Sale, just know it's me.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.